Before I introduce the moderator for the supplier diversity panel, the one thing I do want to make clear, and I think it came up in one of the questions earlier, please keep in mind that this is not public procurement activity. And while there are things that the Gaming Commission can borrow from our public procurement regime, whether it's our Chapter 149 process, whether it's our administrative policy processes, or whether it's creating a vehicle through which those who get licensed to be casino operators bring greater transparency to their procurement efforts, I should point out and stress that this is not a public procurement process, and that what the Gaming Commission will be doing is licensing the operators and then working to make sure that whatever diversity plans were submitted pursuant to the application, that those operators meet and or exceed those commitments that have been made by way of the diversity plan. But again, so I just want to make sure I make that up front so that anyone who has questions focused on process, we're not at that point yet. We really aren't. We are at the point where, as I said earlier today, you know, the future starts not tomorrow, it starts today, and starting to understand the process the commission will use to get to licensing operators. What are those requirements that are part of that license, and how those requirements create real opportunities for individuals or business owners. And so, again, to the extent that you have questions regarding procurement process, it is probably too early for anyone to answer those questions. And to the extent that those of you who are very familiar with the public process, you should understand that, again, these private operators will not have to use the same tools we use in the public sector, but there are some tools that may bring great clarity to the work of the commission. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to belabor the point, and I want to get right into the supplier diversity panel because I have a sense that many of you are business owners who are very interested in how the legislative language will make its way to greater reality for you and others. This panel will be moderated by my good friend and colleague at State Government, Reggie Nunley, who is the Executive Director of the Supplier Diversity Office. I will not mention the panel members because they will introduce themselves to you. Let's just say we have a wonderful panel that can speak specifically to opportunities in the supplier diversity space, as well as why supplier diversity is incredibly important, both as a policy mechanism and as a reality check. And with that said, I will turn the floor over to my good friend Reggie Nunley, who will lead us through this panel. Reggie.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning. And welcome to the Massachusetts Gaming Commission Education Forum on Diversity and Inclusion. As Ron said, my name is Reggie Nunley, and I am the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office, the office that is responsible for certifying MBEs and WBEs within the Commonwealth, as well as disadvantaged business and enterprise businesses for the federal government. Along with that, we're also responsible for overseeing construction reform. We monitor 351 municipalities within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that is the end of my commercial as it relates to the Supplier Diversity Office. First and foremost, I want to thank Chairman Crosby, as well as his colleagues, for having the foresight to have this forum. It is never too early to begin educating the business as well as the workforce community on the impact on the Massachusetts economy as the casinos are going to have. And I want to thank my good friend, Assistant Secretary Ron Marlow, for stepping forward and coordinating today's event and attracting such a distinguished panel of experts to provide advice relative to the industry and its impact in Massachusetts. We had no shortage of experts. Some that were considered sitting in the audience today, folks like Flash Wiley, James Cofield, Celia Blue, all experts in their own right. But as you can see, we only had 4 chairs, and one of them was for me. Today's panelists consist of Ms. Jody Baer, representing WeBank, Dr. Fred McKinney, the President and the CEO of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Diversity Council, and Ms. Megan Cleghorn, a corporate lawyer for restructuring with a full-service global firm. Each panelist will give a brief introduction of themselves and begin the panel discussion with the following question. What is your advice and recommendations as to the things you think the Gaming Commission should be working towards in designing and implementing a regulatory framework that supports the legislative intent regarding supplier diversity? Each panelist will have approximately 10 to 15 minutes, inclusive of a self-introduction, to make their points. Finally, there may be a limited question and answer for post-members' presentations to stay within the time frame of the overall educational forum. Up first is Jody Baer, representing WeBank.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you very much for having me here today. I want to thank the commissioners and chairman for offering this session. Really appreciate it. My name is Jody Baer. I'm actually with the Center for Women in Enterprise in Boston, and I manage the WeBank program, the certification process, and the delivery. So the relationships with WBEs that are certified through WeBank in all 6 New England states, as well as our corporate members who look to source WeBank certified businesses. I am relatively new to supplier diversity. I've been with CWE really just since the beginning of the year. So I am just catching up on all of the important aspects of supplier diversity. I come from many years in marketing and sales in Fortune 100s, high tech, low tech, and have an MBA from Dartmouth, Tuck. So this is a great opportunity, and the first half of this year has just been great in getting up to speed on the importance of supplier diversity, and I'm just delighted to be here to represent WeBank. I want to address my first comments to Reggie's question, and also to the commissioners, as well as any operators that are there, and talk about the benefits of working with a diverse supply base, especially with women-owned businesses. We strongly encourage our companies, and so the operators, the casino operators, to engage in sourcing women-owned businesses and figuring out what kind of metrics they're going to put in place as goals, internal goals for women-owned businesses as part of their bidding process. Women-owned businesses are about 8 million women-owned businesses in the United States. That's about 30% of businesses in the U.S. 20% of those are in the Northeast. These businesses generate $1 trillion in revenue. So that's 4% of U.S. revenue, and 8 million employees, which is 6%. Now, while these numbers are quite good, the sales growth numbers for women-owned businesses still lags the national average. So our goal is to help women-owned businesses grow, secure more contracts, and contribute more to the economy. The benefit of diversifying the supply base with women-owned businesses, and this is something that I talk to my corporate prospects about that are coming in with supplier diversity programs. Well, first and foremost, and they believe this was part of a survey that was conducted by supplier diversity professionals, or procurement professionals, is really, it's the right thing to do. I mean, from a PR and a social responsibility standpoint, it's the right thing to do, to have a diverse supply base. Also, our clients recognize that there are potential cost savings when they're hiring WBEs. They recognize that WBEs and small businesses can provide some innovation. They can be nimble. They can have quick turnaround. They can provide niche products and services. Importantly, for the operators and for corporations, working with women-owned businesses can provide them access to the female customer base. So not only through the women-owned businesses customer base, but also through the market intelligence that the women-owned business brings. And I know that a large part of casinos' consumers are females, so it would be beneficial to them from a market intelligence standpoint to work with women-owned businesses. Importantly, working with small businesses and women-owned businesses contributes to the economy. I mean, I think that goes without saying. You're spending money with small businesses, you're supporting the economy. About 60 to 80% of new job creation is through small businesses. So it's important for our companies and our operators to do business with small businesses. Let's see. And working with small businesses enables, I understand that companies and operators will have their preferred and prime suppliers. And we recognize that, we understand that. These might be larger organizations that are working with the companies. However, we strongly encourage companies and casinos to work with smaller suppliers, and if not as a tier 1 or prime supplier, as a tier 2 and further down the supply chain, especially to develop those suppliers. I mean, there's so much potential with women-owned businesses and small businesses to basically kind of have a farm team of suppliers, develop them so that they can potentially down the line become prime and tier 1 suppliers and bigger suppliers. It's important to help these businesses grow and become better. We understand that the challenges that companies may face is that they're concerned that WBEs might be untested or vulnerable, and this is a valid concern. However, the national survival rate of women-owned businesses is 78%, so this is something to take into consideration. Also, there are a lot of companies, and I assume operators are looking into cost cutting when it comes to vendor selection and vendor streamlining. So this is a challenge to overcome, because what we're trying to do is bring our women-owned businesses in and say, add some more WBEs to your roster of suppliers, and we understand that that's a challenge. And also we understand that an additional challenge is to have the resources to do the due diligence for women-owned businesses and their certification, and also to manage the risk when they're in the supply chain. One great mitigator of that risk as far as due diligence for certification is the WeBank certification. So when it comes to WeBank is a national certification. It's an organization it's a third-party certifier out of Washington, D.C., and the Center for Women in Enterprise is the regional partner of WeBank, so we certify all New England businesses. For the WBEs that are out in the audience, you know that this process is not a simple process. When it comes to certification of businesses, these business owners go through a very rigorous process to prove that their companies are 51% owned, controlled, and operated. They submit a ton of paperwork. They go through a certification committee meeting. They go through site visits. It's a 3 to 6 month process before they can even become certified. For the women-owned businesses out there, we just want to encourage you to go after this business. Not only can it build your company as far as stability and credibility and growth, but you can also, obviously, it would be very beneficial for your company. So we encourage you to strongly market yourselves to the casinos, to the operators, to the commission. However, in order to play, we do encourage you to be prepared to deliver on contracts. So don't have unreasonable expectations about your ability to deliver on this business. Also, we want to be sure that you are financially strong to be able to support the business. And also that you have access to credit or resources, because when you're playing at this level, when it comes to accounts receivable, there can be a lag, 30 to 60 days. You want to make sure that you've got the cash to float for the business. You can also pitch your business to the Tier 1 suppliers, or even Tier 2 suppliers of the operators, and become subcontractors. And also, to get in, you can also offer your services on an as-needed basis, not necessarily becoming a full-time supplier, but you can become an as-needed supplier. So to the Commission, our bottom line recommendations are: provide access, please, to our certified women-owned businesses in order to gain business from the operators. We encourage a goal setting for the women-owned businesses. Typically, a lot of my companies will set 5 to 10% goals, spend goals, or bid goals for WBEs in their supply procurement process. We would encourage you to encourage the operators to develop our WBE suppliers, to attend matchmaking sessions where they can come to. Dr. Fred had an event the other day. We're having an event on Friday where the operators could sit down and have sessions, short sessions, with certified businesses to find out if they wanted to add those to their roster. We encourage you to encourage operators to streamline the registration process for WBEs to make it simpler, and also to encourage your operators to make their marketing materials and their websites friendly to women-owned businesses, so that it's easy for them to understand exactly what those operators are looking for and how they go about submitting bids. So in short, women-owned businesses are a strong player in the economy, and by giving more business to the women-owned businesses, we're increasing our economic strength, especially in Massachusetts, of course, and other New England states. And for the women-owned businesses out there, we encourage you to strongly market yourselves and get yourself in the supply chain and into the game.
Thank you, Jody. I have a follow-up question here. We're recommending to the Commission that we open up the eligibility in terms of MBEs and WBEs, because we have actually 3 organizations: WeBank, the Greater New England Minority Supplier Council, Development Council, and the Massachusetts Supply Diversity Office, all of which certifies individuals. This would be unprecedented, that they would be able to accept any one of those certifications that would lessen the burden on one of the MBEs or WBEs that are in the audience today to have to jump around to the different alphabet soups. How many WBEs do you currently have certified in your database, and what might be the percentage in terms of those that do goods and services versus construction?
The WBEs that we have WeBank certified in New England are about 325 businesses. As far as a breakdown in industry, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I would say that construction services are maybe in the 5 or 6% range of our businesses.
Okay. I think I want to hold the audience questions until we get through with the whole panel, but in the event that a commissioner has a burning question right now for Jody, we will accept that. Hearing none, I'd like to move on to the next panelist, Dr. Fred McKinney from the Greater New England Minority Supply Development Council.
Thank you, Reggie. Good morning. I also want to thank Ron and Chairman Crosby and the other commissioners. And I want to commend the Commonwealth and the governor for paying attention to this critically important topic of diversity in all of its aspects. I think what we're really talking about here is what I would call inoculation from stupidity and self-destruction. And I mean, if you don't do this right, it can blow up in your face, and so this is a way to avoid a lot of unnecessary problems. The Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council is a 501c3 business organization. It's a membership organization. Our members are large organizations, primarily in the private sector. We're sort of a parallel organization to Jody's organization, WeBank, whereby we are certifying minority-owned businesses, and we define minority racially and ethnically. We're part of the National Minority Supplier Development Council. Within our regional councils, there are 36 regional councils around the country in the NMSDC network. We have 3,500 corporate members, over 13,000 certified minority businesses, and those businesses conduct about $120 billion in sales to those corporate members on an annual basis, and it's growing. I've served in this capacity since 2001, and I'm an economist by training. In answer to the question, it's hard to reel me in with a question from Ron, but I better answer the question, or I might not get invited back to Ron's family picnic next year. But I did want to talk a little bit about certification, opportunities, characteristics of suppliers, and the characteristics of a successful corporate supplier diversity program that I think the commissioners I'd like to share with the commissioners. I agree with Jody and with Reggie. We have 3 certifying organizations here today that are represented on the panel. And my advice to business owners is get certified everywhere that they're eligible for certification. So, because you never know where it's going to be needed, I do recommend that the casino operators accept all 3 certifications as sort of an independent third-party proof that the business that they're working with are who they say they are. Because again, that's one of the things that if you do that, you are inoculated against a front page article in the Boston Globe about somebody who says they're something and they're not. So rely on the certification agencies that are here. They can help you. In terms of opportunities, I mean, there are tremendous opportunities that this development is making available to the business community, and they really are at all phases of the project, from the pre-construction opportunities, from marketing, design, planning, human resource planning, to the construction, the bricks and mortar, post-construction, marketing, et cetera, again, operations. And let me just by way of sort of introduction as well say that we have some experience at the council in gaming. The Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods are both corporate members of the Greater New England Council. We just finished our 3-day trade show at Foxwoods on Friday this past week, where we had over 1,000 people. We've been at Foxwoods for over 15 years. In fact, we were celebrating our 15th year at Foxwoods this past week. They also have been working with us on the MBE development side, because they're sort of unique in the sense that not only are they a major gaming company, companies, but they're also eligible for minority status for some of the businesses that they create. So in various capacities, we've had the opportunity to work very closely with them on the business development side, but also on the procurement and supplier diversity side. And so, I come to this with some information and knowledge and experience with the casino industry about what it is that they buy to keep those doors open and to keep the people coming. And supplier diversity is an important component of those casinos. If you look at the demographics of the customer base that comes through those doors, it's going to be a very diverse population of consumers. And so I think it's incumbent on the companies to pay close attention to the supplier base, and you heard for the earlier panel the employment base and the characteristics of the people that work for the casinos. But it's a long list. You name it, and these organizations will buy it. I have some messages also to the diverse consumers in the room before I get to the recommendations to the commissioners. The standard qualities that are going to be absolutely necessary to be successful in this industry are those same qualities that are necessary to be successful in just about any industry. And one is the quality of the goods and services that the supplier offers to the market, the competitiveness of the supplier to the market competition, the creativity of the supplier. Companies are looking for creative solutions to problems. They all have problems. They all are trying to solve those problems. They don't have all the answers. If you have answers, then they are looking for you. The flexibility that is necessary to operate successfully in this environment is highly important. And responsiveness. These are companies that have a lot of pressure on them by a demanding consumer base, and there's a need to be responsive. So if something breaks, it needs to be fixed now. And so if you have the capacity to do that, you'll be more successful than if you don't have the capacity to do that. There's also some industry-specific aspects of this industry that I think are important for diverse suppliers to be aware of. One is the security, which was already mentioned on the HR side. These are secure sites. There's a lot of cash in these facilities. So security and background is very important. It's as important as working in, we have a lot of companies that are in the defense industry. This is almost like equivalent to working at a submarine base, and it's that kind of security. This is a 24/7 operation. So this is not something you can go home and at 5 or 6 o'clock and not take any calls until the next morning. You've got to be up or have somebody up at least that's prepared to get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning to fix something. There's a huge customer focus. So MBEs, WBEs have to be really laser focused on customer service. This is a high pressure environment. We have very few companies that I've been involved with that I've seen the pressure on the workforce of the senior workforce of these companies like the casino industry. For the people who want to work in this industry, this is not easy work. This is high pressure work and is very demanding and requires a great deal of what I would call emotional intelligence. To be able to deal in that environment. The customer base is hugely diverse. I mentioned that already. So being able to work in that environment, diverse customers, diverse workforce is going to be highly important. Now, in terms of the question about advice to the commissioners and what I would say in terms of supplier diversity, this is going to require, to be successful, it's going to require top-down support. So this is not something that can start at the procurement level. This has to start at the CEO level of the operators who are going to have these contracts. And they have to not just say it, they have to believe it, they have to walk it. They should be part of the corporate structure. This is something, supplier diversity should be integrated throughout the system. So this is not just a procurement function. In fact, I think one of the pitfalls of many companies is that they have not integrated supplier diversity into other aspects of their business, particularly marketing. So supplier diversity should be part of your marketing. The diversity in procurement functions. So I think it's important that you have procurement professionals, people who are making the buying decisions. There should be diversity among that group. That's a great way to have checks and balances and also people with different experiences coming to the table. A dedication of resources to supplier diversity. You can't do this on the cheap. So, the leaders within the companies that get these contracts should understand clearly going into this, you can't just put it on your website that your supplier diversity is important to you. It has to be a line item. You have to be spending some real resources. You have to have some talent. It's not a job by default. Okay, let's take the person who had the smallest straw that goes into supplier diversity. You have to have talent in this position. And so that means resources. The information flow, Jody mentioned that. The diverse business community has to know what's coming up. And there has to be a process that's in place for the casino operators that can get the information out to the supplier base, and particularly the diverse supplier base. The diverse supplier base has different sources of information. They may not read the advertisements in the Boston Globe. You might have to put some advertisements in El Planete or El Mundo or the Boston Banner. So those are, you got to do that, and you should spend as much attention to those publications as to the other publications. The use of resources in the community. There are lots of resources. Many of them are here in this room, other organizations that can support the work of the commission and the casino operators. They need to plug into those relationships and be integrated into the community that they're operating in. The goals, measurements, and rewards. You have to have goals to be successful in supplier diversity. I think it was Jack Welch at GE that said, if you don't measure it, it's not important. And so you have to measure it, you have to have goals, and there should be rewards when those goals are accomplished. And so those rewards should go from the CEO all the way down through the procurement people to the supplier diversity managers that are involved. So they need to have the incentives to do what you want them to do. It's very simple. Authenticity. And this goes back to what I said earlier, is that the leaders within the industry, the operators, they have to be authentic. And that's, it really shows. This MBE population, this diverse business population, this is a savvy group of business people. And they understand very clearly who's serious and who's not serious. And so it's very important for the casino operators to communicate effectively and authentically with this population of business owners. And it's not that you have to say yes to everybody. In fact, you'll say no more than you'll say yes, but it's how you say no, and it's how you communicate that, and it's what you communicate to the community as a whole. The creativity is also required by the operators to be successful in supplier diversity. There may be some opportunities for the operators to create joint ventures with some of the suppliers in this room and elsewhere, the diverse business community. So don't look at this as just an arm's length transaction between a casino and a supplier. There may be some things where you guys can collaborate with the suppliers. That needs to be encouraged. And the final piece that I would, in terms of the characteristics, is don't make assumptions about what MBEs, WBEs can and can't do. I mean, we have diverse suppliers essentially in every industry, and they come in all sizes. I mean, we've got billion-dollar minority businesses in our organization. They may not be here in Boston, but we can bring them here if you need that and you don't find it in this local market. And we can bring them here with the condition that they work with the local supplier base. So those things, I think, are absolutely critical for the commission and the companies that will be operating these casinos to understand. And final comment is this, is that there's a benefit, and I know that Megan is going to talk about the case for this, but just in our example of last week when we were at Foxwoods, we had close to 1,000 people over that 3-day period, about 250 guests that stayed at least 2 nights. And you look at, and I know the operators know these numbers like the telephone numbers of their spouses. There's those 250 guest stays, overnight stays, those 1,000 people, they spend money when they're there. And I estimate that it's about $500,000 in economic impact every year that we go to Foxwoods. Now, we go there because they have a program. They are doing supplier diversity. So we like going there. But there are other organizations like ours who will be attracted to these casinos based on their performance in this space. And so I think that's important to remember when the companies that are doing this, that there is a benefit if you do it well. Also I have just, by way of introduction, I've got a couple of folks here from my office who are here and we'd be happy to talk to you. Warren Bacon and Jeanette Gerald. Warren is the project director from our MBDA office. And so that's my commercial, Reggie, and thank you.
Sure, Dr. Fred. We do have one follow-up question for you, Dr. Fred, and you touched on it just briefly, and that is that there are MBEs and WBEs that are all sizes. Right. For the large billion-dollar companies and those that are probably $3, $4, $5 million plus, they tend to be in the game and know how to play. For those very small firms, Is there a recommendation either to the Gaming Commission or to the suppliers that are here today in terms of how they address the capacity that they may have as a very small firm?
Well, you know, there are different types of small firms. There are small firms that can be big firms. There are small firms that don't want to be big firms. And I think first of all, the business owner has to decide what they want to be, what they're trying to accomplish. If they're small firms that want to be big firms, then that means they're going to have a strategy for getting big. They're going to have to gain some information, some knowledge about what's necessary to get big. They're going to have to perhaps check their ego at the door and learn from somebody that is big. They may have to partner with somebody in ways that they can learn from on the ground. So and there are resources out there like WeBank, like the G&E MSDC, and others, where companies can go and say essentially, this is where we are. This is what we want to do. And this is the help that I think we need. And that's why I introduced the MBDA Center. We're here, WeBank is here, we can help some of those companies get to the point where they need to be. You know, the reality is that, and this is the truth of the matter. These are large organizations, and they're trying to accomplish some things. They got customers knocking on the door. They've got to deliver some products and services. So it's the job of the MBE, the WBE, to communicate to the buyer that we can do this. And let me show you how we can do this, or how we've done it in the past. So it's not easy. That's why, you know, it's not easy. But I think that there are resources out there for the smaller companies to get big.
Jody wanted to add something to that?
Yeah. I just want to echo what Dr. Fred is saying, that this is for the smaller businesses, if you want to play, partnering is a huge opportunity. And when you're certified with WeBank and with the G&A MSDC, you have access to the network of certified businesses to be able to partner. So not only locally, so when I talked about the 325 certified businesses we have in New England, I was not mentioning the 11,000 certified businesses nationwide that are WeBank certified. So as Dr. Fred said, we can bring them in.
Thank you. We'll give the commissioners an opportunity as well to, if there's a specific question to Dr. Fred at this point.
Yeah. You talked about recommending that to the operators that they don't just think of a vendor relationship with MBEs, they think of collaborations. What did you mean by that?
Well, there are plenty of examples that are, you know, functions of in the industry that need to be done, but it's not clear that they have to be done by employees as opposed to companies with perhaps the participation of an MBE. For example, a limousine service. These casinos are gonna need to get people to and from places. There may be some diverse suppliers out there who need to do this but need some scale. There's an opportunity there with the resources of the casino to partner with an existing company to develop the scale that the buyer needs to be successful, and to be a piece of it. You know, and it can be very creative. I'm not saying that there's one way to do it, but there are a lot of different ways to do that, and that's just one example. It could be food service. It could be cleaning. It could be the repair of slot machines. It could be a whole range of things that there's a decision that every company has to make, whether to buy or to employ. And so you're at a great opportunity here where you're starting, you know, these companies I think have a plan, but there's nothing been built yet. They haven't opened their doors yet. So now is the time to think about and consider the ability for these organizations to play a significant role in the business development in this community that could have long-lasting effects beyond the gaming industry.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Absent that, we'd like to move on to our next panelist, Megan Cleghorn. Megan?
Thank you, Reggie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, lady and gentlemen commissioners, for including me in the diversity and inclusion conversation this morning. I'm most appreciative. I'm Megan Cleghorn. I'm a corporate restructuring attorney with Skadden-Arps, Slatemore, and Flom in the Wilmington, Delaware office. I actually have practiced corporate restructuring law for the last 14 years, and I specialize in representing companies in distress situations, although I also represent other stakeholder constituencies. We do that in out-of-court workouts, and we do that in court in Chapter 11 cases. That introduction may necessarily beg the question, how does your perspective fit into today's conversation? Not only because I'm familiar with the issues that often give rise to distressed situations, but because I am interested in the broader organizational change perspective, not just the operational and balance sheet restructuring work that I do in my day job, but the organizational change perspective from a shifting internal culture perspective. And as a result of that, I have reduced my workload as an attorney and recently attended the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania to get my MBA in the program for executives, where I focused on leadership as well as bold transformational change. And certainly, as the marketplace is shifting, we are seeing that companies are going to be undergoing quite significant transformational changes as diversity and inclusion becomes ingrained in their practices. So we've heard from Assistant Secretary Marlowe in his introductory remarks this morning that this is about access and opportunity. And we heard from Georgiana also that this is about equity. And we heard from my colleague Jody that it's the right thing to do. Folks, these are irrefutable arguments. But I'm here today to actually present the business case. I'm not here as an agent of my law firm. I'm not here in my capacity as a lawyer to give you the legal perspective. I'm here to give you the business perspective, because diversity and inclusion is not only a matter of equity and a matter of equality, but it is also fundamentally a business imperative. So why am I here today to talk about this? Why do we care? Well, I think there are a handful of different reasons why we do. Let's start with the primary one, and that is that the commissioners are actually required to consider not only diversity and inclusion from a workforce and a supplier, vendor, procurement perspective, but they're also required, under the legislation, to evaluate if an applicant has the financial capacity to build and sustain a successful operation. And so I'm here today, folks, to make the argument that it is absolutely a business necessity that one pays mind to diversity and inclusion in order to build and sustain a competitive business advantage. Diversity and inclusion is not merely altruistic, folks. It's not just a matter of charity. It is a business imperative. Now, there are some people that actually subscribe to the philosophy that businesses don't have a social conscience, businesses don't have social responsibility. And perhaps there was some credibility to that argument years ago. It doesn't fly anymore. Doesn't fly. And why is that? Fundamentally because we're operating in a very diverse marketplace and in an increasingly diverse marketplace. So we've heard our colleagues today quote a number of statistics, and I am going to share a few more with you because some people, and I'm not part of this camp, but actually subscribe to the philosophy that I don't like the touchy-feely soft arguments. I only like the hard data arguments. So in order to please every segment of the community, I'm going to address some of the hard empirical data, and then we're going to bolster it with some of the more soft stuff. In terms of relevant statistics, the U.S. growth rate for racial and ethnic groups in recent years has significantly outpaced the population growth rate with respect to white Americans. And this is true nationwide. With respect to Massachusetts, approximately 25%, and I've gotten this from the relevant census data, approximately 25% of Massachusetts residents are non-white, non-Hispanic. 51% are women. So if you're sitting there thinking about the business relevance to that, how can one possibly ignore 50% of the gender population? How can one possibly ignore 25% of the racial and ethnic population and not think that's going to evidence itself in their financial stability, in their ability to build and maintain a competitive business advantage? Dr. Barry Barbosa mentioned a short while ago that the casino industry has not been recession-proof. Casinos, folks, actually are known to carry an unusually high debt-to-EBITDA ratio. This is an industry that is a highly leveraged industry. You must be quite careful in the choices you make, or you can find yourself in a distressed situation. One way to actually work towards building that competitive advantage is to focus on your diversity and your inclusion. So let's look at that, break that down from a profitability perspective, looking at the revenue and looking at the cost issues. With respect to revenue, I think of this as falling into three categories. How do you actually respond to your increasingly diverse customer demand? How do you actually address your company reputation and your brand image? And how do you actually then ensure innovation? By the way, you may notice that this content has a bit of a different flavor from my two predecessors. Assistant Secretary Marlowe asked that I go last because the business case, frankly, folks, is equally relevant to supplier diversity and to the workforce, and frankly is relevant to all stakeholders in the entire diversity and inclusion discourse. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where the MBE WBE fits into the picture and also how the workforce fits into this business argument. Turning back to the revenue generation perspective. In order to sustain and actually expand market share in a diverse marketplace, a casino actually has to understand the perspectives of its stakeholders. How in the world could a casino possibly offer the products and services that are in demand in the community if it doesn't have that very community represented in its workforce, represented in its leadership, and represented all throughout its stakeholder community? It's simply impossible. With respect to brand image, here's where I think you're going to see supplier diversity become even more relevant. There's a lot of public conversation. In fact, our gathering here today to talk about supplier diversity, there is a whole lot of conversation in the media about supplier diversity and the Commission's attention to the same. A company's reputation impacts its brand image quite substantially. We have seen in the media a particular company who will remain nameless who has made rather derogatory remarks about a special segment of our society, the LGBT community, and it has significantly impaired their reputation. It will be interesting to see what the financial consequences of that are. Not a good idea. It's important. People are watching. People are watching who you choose as your contractors. People are watching who you choose as your suppliers, who you choose as your vendors, and it is influencing their view of your brand. That impacts revenue. In terms of innovation, we're in a marketplace where change is rapid fire. I know that when I got my new smartphone, I had not yet, this is of course in part because I'm not particularly tech savvy, but I had not yet figured out how all of the functions worked on my cell phone before the next one was out. It's happening fast, folks, and so innovation is really important. Staying one step ahead of your competitors is really important. How does one innovate if they don't have all of the players whose interests matter present at the table? You can't. You lose your competitive business advantage. Your revenue suffers, your profitability suffers. Let's talk about costs. I think about costs with respect to the diversity and inclusion conversation as falling into two broad categories. Risk issues, otherwise known as litigation risks, and disgruntled employees. How does this manifest? Over the past decade, these numbers are frankly staggering. Race and gender discrimination settlements alone cost $2.3 billion. Now, I say settlements alone. What do I mean by that? That is exclusive of attorney fees, and most importantly, it's exclusive of the effect on market cap. So if one could really, with specificity, quantify that impact, it would be even more staggering than the $2.3 billion I just identified. This is a real problem. So it's important from a cost perspective that you not only do the right thing and you comply with the law, but that you keep your people happy. In terms of dissatisfied employees, how do we see this impact costs? Well, people that don't feel welcome in their business, people that don't feel that their voice matters, people that don't feel that they're there because their contributions are genuinely valued rather than just representing some check-the-box category, are unhappy people. This means higher turnover, and there are tremendous costs associated with that. This means higher absenteeism. There are costs associated with that. And probably most persuasively with respect to this category of disgruntled employees is the fact that it substantially impairs their productivity. Impairs their productivity, they're less efficient. Get less work done, higher costs, less profitability. So you can see this is a real business problem. Just to share one final relevant statistic with all of you to sort of underscore my profitability argument. In 2010, Diversity Inc. actually did a study. And the top 50 companies recognized by Diversity Inc. in the 10-year period prior thereto, they actually outperformed the NASDAQ by 28%. 28%. S&P by 25, Dow by 22. These are not immaterial numbers, and they're not rounding errors, and they're not so insufficient that one could actually say no correlation exists between diversity and inclusion and profitability. So, commissioners, what should you focus on in terms of what I'm arguing today that could possibly be relevant in your assessment of applicants? Certainly, whether or not the applicant is actually offering relevant information about what their workforce diversity plan is and also what their supplier diversity and procurement plans are. And that's an excellent first step and obviously necessary. Beyond that, what's most important? Frankly, what I think is most telling is whether or not an applicant actually has a chief diversity officer. And if, in fact, they don't call this person a chief diversity officer, do they call this person something of equal seniority? Executive vice president, senior vice president, or is this person a vice president and a director? This is not to disrespect anybody holding those positions. They're extremely important, but we all understand how a corporate hierarchy actually functions, and we all understand which titles actually get greater acknowledgement, and who pays attention based on what those pretty little letters are that show up on your business card. Who has a seat at the table? So, do you have a chief diversity officer? To whom does that person report? That's quite telling in terms of how invested the company is in diversity and inclusion efforts. Do they report to HR? Do they report to the senior-most person in HR? Do they report to a more junior person in HR? I submit to you that the company that is most invested in diversity and inclusion does not have their CDO report to HR. While HR is excruciatingly important, it's not focused on the business case, at least not the lion's share of their work. They should report to the CEO. They should report to the C-suite. They should report to somebody who is in turn reporting to the board of directors. That makes a loud statement about how invested they are in diversity and inclusion. And so, last but not least, what is the scope of that person's responsibilities? Is that person limited to an EEO, compliance, legal, HR function? Please don't misunderstand me. I am not suggesting for a second that those are not excruciatingly important issues and that they are not worthy of great respect. But the conversation doesn't end there. The person also has to have a seat at the strategy table where conversations are being had about how to actually integrate diversity and inclusion into the overall corporate strategy conversation. These are important things to pay attention to. I invite you to give them careful consideration. And with that, I will turn the floor back over to Executive Director Nunnally.
Megan, thank you very much. Thank you to the rest of our panel as well. The Assistant Secretary gave us an additional 4 minutes to ask some questions, and I want to give the first crack at those questions to the Commissioner Cameron.
Yes. Ms. Cleghorn, I thought your comments were very well taken. I mean, they really resonated with me, and it makes me think of us as a commission and what we need to do to make sure our investigative staff understands these values, because they will be the folks reporting back to us on their findings of suitability. And if they're not paying attention to those issues, if they don't value those issues, that may get lost. I know that's really important in public safety. The investigative staff has to value those kinds of things when we're looking at selection for a diverse group, whatever it may be. So it just makes me think that that's something we have to be careful of from a commission standpoint, is hiring folks that share these values. And we'll look at it in the licensing process, in the customer service piece, and in particular the investigative piece, because that's the group that will be reporting back to us, and we'll be making decisions based on their findings.
I appreciate those comments. It's important that we focus on the business case as much as the equity case. There is, sadly, some small subset of the population that doesn't buy the equality argument. Certainly none of those people are present here today, but there are some people that just don't buy it. They don't care. They don't care either because they're not personally impacted, or they don't care because they are not cut from the same genuine, decent human being cloth from which we're all cut. I do say so in my humble opinion. But that being said, assuming that they don't care, you can make an equally persuasive business argument. So I love that you will pay careful attention to that. It's really important. And it's in everybody's best interest.
Other questions for the commissioner?
Just a follow-up to those comments. What would be your thoughts? This is to the panel, but Ms. Claire Horn as well. Your thoughts about looking at the track record of companies. Many of the potential applicants have a track record in the country and in other countries as well. What would be your thoughts, again, to the panel as to how do we evaluate, besides the points that you make about the seniority of a diversity officer?
I'm happy to respond. I see you nodding your head, so you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do.
Please.
Thank you. Excellent question. I do think that the record of companies is important. Their history is important. The old saying about tigers don't change their stripes. And I think there's a legacy. I think that it's fair for the commission to ask of the applicants to demonstrate, to show their history, their commitment to these important areas of diversity. And I think, without knowing all that information, I think that many of them that I'm aware of have a history that they can lay out to the community and say, this is what we've done. And I think if they're honest, and most companies are not where they want to be, they're only a very small proportion of corporations in America that I would call having a world-class supplier diversity program. Most are not there. But what's important is that they have a path to get there, that they have a commitment among the senior management to get there. And so I do think that it's important to ask senior management of the applicants to share with the commission what their intentions are. And then you have to hold their feet to the fire.
We say in the law, past performance is the best indicator of future performance.
Other questions from the commissioners?
I have a
Stebbins?
follow-up question, and I'm going to include you in this too, Reggie. You talked about your certifications, Jody, and Dr. Fred and Reggie. Can you help me quantify the differences between each of your certification programs?
In terms of number of companies certified or process?
The process, criteria, you're urging an operator to kind of accept each of your accreditations kind of across the board, but I was wondering if there are big differences between the three of them.
I don't think there are big differences. I think the main difference is in the sphere in which we all work. Certifications from the Mass Supply Diversity Office generally means that you're looking to do work in the public sphere. And with the MBEs and the WBE certification, they generally look to do work in the private sector. We need to get better in terms of being able to have some type of reciprocity because the process, the documents are relatively the same. Therefore, that's why we are encouraging the commission to accept all three of the certifications as valid because we do understand that the process is primarily the same.
So the information collected, pretty much all the same, it's
Pretty
just a
much all
matter
the same.
of you're seeking certification to pursue one course of business over another.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the state is free.
It's our competitive
There,
advantage.
there is no free lunch.
WeBank is more fun.
Commissioners,
Does that mean, Ron, that you work for free?
commissioners, let me bring this back. Commissioners, let me close by saying you have an awesome responsibility for the development of an economic impact in Massachusetts. We encourage you to take the time to dot all your I's and cross all of your T's to ensure you get it right the first time. This is a first great step, these education forums. We continue to want you to reach out to your stakeholders. I think today's attendance is indicative of the widespread interest in the jobs, both in construction as well as in the goods and the services industry, as well as positions of equity for MBEs and WBEs in the Commonwealth and New England. Between WeBank and the Greater New England Minority Supplier Diversity Council and the Mass Supplier Diversity Office, we have thousands of qualified MBEs and WBEs that are actively and enthusiastically wanting to participate in this impact. We stand at the ready, Commonwealth as well as the private certification agencies, to walk down this path with you to ensure that you get it right and that we have an impact on the MBE, WBE community that helps them grow and prosper and create wealth as well as the jobs. I want to thank the panel and encourage the commission to continue the good work that you've been doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you, Dr. Fred. Thank you, Jody, and thank you, Megan. We are going to do a 5-minute break, and then, maybe only be 5 unless the chairman shows a little dispensation. And then my work for today, my free work, by the way, for today will be done, and Chairman Crosby will convene the commission in its open public meeting. For anyone who has questions for the commission, please make sure you get it in the box there. I know there are at least a couple more that have come in. Let me once again say thank you to the chairman and the members of the commission for being willing to do this forum. It has been a wonderful experience. Let me say thank you to the panel members for the Supplier Diversity Panel and the Workforce Diversity Panel. Let me say thank you to Nani, Maria, and Tina, who helped with the sign-in. And once again, let me say thank you to each and every one of you who gave up a portion of your morning to be here because you recognize that the future starts today and not tomorrow. God bless.